Hello, welcome to Podfic Galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Goldscythe. I read outlaw fanfictions for you busy bees, free of charge and no strings attached. Today I will continue reading the Silmarillion fic by Aeolian Sands from Archive of Our Own called The Rescue Party. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available to me. On with the show. The Rescue Party by Aeolian Sands. Chapter 40. Some things never change. As Turgon galloped past the body of the great dragon, he desperately searched for a sign of Finrod. All around him were orc bodies and a few elven as well. He noticed with surprise that some of them bore the banners of Aethel Sirion. Is Findegan here as well? Then he saw a glint of golden armor in the distance. He urged the horse forward. "Hail!" he greeted as he approached. "Lord Turgano," Orodreth replied, turning to look at him as he helped a wounded soldier with a heavily bleeding shoulder. "You missed most of the battle. It is very nearly won. I am healing the wounded. An extra horse would be a great help in getting some of the more seriously hurt back to camp." Turgon nodded. "You can have all the horses I have left." He reached for his belt and blew his horn to sound for the rest of the forces of Gondolin. Penlod was the first to reach him. "My king?" the Lord of the Pillar and Tower asked from the back of his stallion. "Looks as if we have arrived too late to assist in the fight. Penlod, gather some horses and help Lord Artaresto to get the wounded to the healers." "Of course." "Artaresto, do tell me, what of Findarato?" "King Findarato is a stubborn old mule. If you can keep him in the healing tent, I would be much obliged. He has tried to escape 3 times. I am surprised that he hasn't succeeded yet, considering his silver tongue and ability to disappear off the map," Turgon laughed, knowing all too well the stories from Nargothrond how his cousin would be holding feasts 1 minute, then missing for the next 10,000 minutes, only to turn up again in a camp of mortal men or in a dwarven mine. "Father is doing the Valara's work. He has tackled Uncle all 3 times. Although getting body slammed is probably not helping Uncle's leg injury at all," Orodreth replied, but something he said instantly jolted Turgon from the mental image of Finrod inspecting gemstone mines with the dwarves. "Father? But Angrod is dead." Then it hit the king of Gondolin like a ton of marble bricks. Oh. In retrospect, Turgon should have known. He knew that his own father had returned, and his sister too. And of course, he had to deal with Feanor personally. So it was perfectly logical that the blonde man-child number 2 would be back in the flesh. "Your father has returned from Mundus?" "Yes." "Good Manwe," he muttered. "The armbreaker himself. Findarato's leg isn't going to be his only hurt limb if he keeps it up. Did he learn anything from his childhood?" He sighed. "And what of Vaganaro? Where is he?" "Because where there is an Angrod, one can find an Aignor not far away." "North with the Feanorians." "Feanorians? Just what this day needs." "Oh, I see. This is a whole family reunion." His sarcasm was tangible. "Findegana?" "Yes," Orodreth grunted as he finished bandaging the soldier's shoulder. "He's with the Feanorians too." Turgon shut his eyes to the incoming headache. "I guess I should go make sure they haven't set anything on fire, and while I'm at it, I can get the High King to force Findarato to stay in his cot before your father cripples him." Turgon then urged his horse towards the north, mentally preparing himself for a meeting ahead. The scenery continued to be grim as his horse trotted through the mangled bodies of orcs. Turgon strained his eyes to look for the inevitable fistfight between cousins, but did not see any signs of family reunion just yet. Only a few elven soldiers were milling around or tending to the wounded. Then his horse startled when a large wolf pup raced past them, carrying a woman who was shouting war cries. Her hair was whipping in the wind and her smile a bit too wide. "For free Beliand!" She turned then, as if realizing no one else was around her. Turgon then spied in the distance an elf with distinctive, wavy golden hair panting as he raced after her on foot. "Hurry, my love!" the feral girl on the wolf shouted. "I think I see an orc that still has some fight left! Charge, Winion! One last brawl!" "No!" I'm done. The exhausted elf, trying to catch her, shouted in Agnar's voice. Turgon looked to see that it was indeed his cousin, just as he dramatically dropped to his knees, then flopped on his back in apparent exhaustion. Agnar's curls were a wild mess, and he looked more like a homeless vagabond than an elven lord. The maiden on the wolf's back giggled, got off the creature, and ran to Agnar. He lay down beside him, and then seemed to notice Turgon on his horse. "Turgon of Gondolin!" she gasped from where she lay. Turgon was, admittedly, quite confused. Agnar he had expected to see after his conversation with Orodreth, but who was this strange woman? "Aganaro? Sorry, Turu, have you met Andreth? She's the love of my life." Agnar turned his head towards her, and his eyes were bright in adoration, even as he still fought for his breath, and it looked like his neck was bleeding in places. Angry red marks were called all around his throat. "And if she would stand up," Agnar continued after a pause, motioning with his hand. It was the woman's, Andreth's, turn to look confused, but she stood. Agnar rolled over and pushed himself to one knee. He truly was a sight, with grass stains on his tunic, those red marks around his neck, and a few other bleeding scrapes, but he seemed not to care at all. Instead, the golden-haired elf reached for something on his belt and produced a ring with a sapphire in it. "Andreth, will you marry me?" Andreth jumped and immediately hugged him. The wolf pup howled and wagged its tail in excitement. "Yes!" Turgon's mouth fell open. What? Here he had come expecting war and witnessing a marriage proposal instead. Did Agnar hit his head? Why was he proposing to a random savage girl riding wolves? Agnar must have caught Turgon's disturbed stare. "To be more polite, cousin. Andreth's the daughter of Boromir of the House of Beor. She's a wise and noble woman, and I have loved her for countless years." Turgon was even more confused because last he checked, Boromir's daughter was a human. "As I told the others, I convinced Nama to turn me into an elf so that I might be with my beloved," Andreth replied on seeing Turgon's face. The king of Gondolin wondered at once if he had been cut with a poisoned blade. Clearly this was a hallucination. He continued to stare for several seconds. Then he violently shook his head. When the images of his lord cousin and the savage girl did not disappear, he decided that this was for Finrod, or Finarfin, if he was also alive, to sort out. Thankfully, he was saved from the hallucination when a distant shout rang out. Looking up to see a small skirmish up ahead, he nudged his horse towards the commotion. They had galloped only a short distance when a cry of, "That's 60 orcs down by my blade! Old man, you are falling behind!" reached his ears. Was that Celebrimbor? He sounded older, but then Turgon reasoned that it had been a long time since he had last seen him. "I would have more if I wasn't so busy trying to protect you from getting a knife to the face!" Someone who sounded a lot like Kurofin grumbled. Turgon crested a small hill and immediately saw father and son in the center of a small mob of orcs at its base. Both seemed to be getting in each other's way more than necessary as they finished this last band of foes. Then he noticed that someone else was watching them. His heart skipped a beat. Lomion? His sister's son, the one he had very much considered his own son, stood to the side. Forgetting everything else, Turgon leapt off his horse and ran to him, crushing the other in a hug. "Praise Manwa, you are all right," he told him. He felt Maiklin hesitantly return the hug. "Why?" Maiklin asked after a moment. To Turgon, it was a slap in the face. "Why?" he repeated, bringing his hands down to rest on the young man's shoulders. "Because you are like a son to me, and I was so very afraid that I had lost you." Maiklin looked down. Turgon only hugged him again, nearly crushing the young elf in his embrace. "What makes you think any different?" "I'm always treated like an outsider." Then something pounded on Maiklin's back. Turgon wasn't watching, so he stumbled and was forced to release the hug. A feral-looking Celebrimbor stood there grinning. "Nonsense! Do you need me to bring Arakano here to beat some sense into you? You're one of us. Always have been. We're all family. Even the grumpy hermit, Uncle Turo here. A small chuckle escaped Maeglin, but Turkan could only stand there, his brain unable to process the insult after so many other revelations. A hermit? He gasped after a moment. But then something else Keleperinpor said made him pause. Wait, Arcano? He's back from the dead, Kurufin answered as he walked to them, limping slightly. You need to rein in his energy. He's probably trying to charge Angamanda right now. Arcano is alive too? For now, at least, Kurufin answered, before sitting down on the grass with a thought. Oh, and cousin Turkano? The oath is gone. I'm not sure what is happening in the north, but the oath no longer weighs on my heart. Turkan sat down next to his cousin. This was too much news all at once. From Angrod and Agnor being alive, to Agnor proposing to some woman on a wolf, to seeing Maeglin again and hearing that he felt unloved, and now receiving news that his baby brother was alive and the oath of the Feanorians broken. The last point troubled Turkan more than it ought have been. Turkan's mind went to the thought of his friends who had been with Feanor, and not to mention his sister too. For the oath to have been fulfilled meant they had confronted Morgoth, and Morgoth was not likely to let any who faced him live. As if to reinforce his fear for their safety, the earth suddenly rattled with quakes and a crevice of fire appeared. You think I can jump the fury chasm? Dueko, no! No! The commanding voices of Madros and Fingon ordered at the same time, yet they were too late because Turkan looked to see Kelekorm leaping over the newly opened chasm. He landed in a roll. Toro, it's been too long, the silver-haired hunter declared. No. Yet apparently fate decided that Turkan was in for a family reunion whether he liked it or not. It took a few minutes for the others to go around the chasm, but soon he found himself in a party with Fingon, Madros, Kelekorm, Keleperinpor, Kurufin, and Maeglin. I thought Morio was with you all, Kurufin asked. He and his son were with Arcano, Madros replied in a grave voice. I haven't seen them since the dragon fell. Son? Something dropped from the sky near where the group huddled. Turkan considered taking his horse and Maeglin and running for the hills. With a bit of concern, he looked to see who it was and was only partially relieved to see Osse breathing heavily as his dark wings dissipated. All eyes looked towards the Maya. Eonwe and Sauron have slain each other. I took Eonwe back to Valmar. He will recover in time, but likely won't be able to regenerate a new fauna for a few days. But this is not the only news. What else has happened? Fingon asked. Feanora recovered the Silmarils and broke one, ending Moringotto, and coming very close to ending himself. Yet Luthien, daughter of Melian, was able to lead a great song of power to save him. Luthien? Madras asked, and there was respect in his voice. Yes, your father owes her his life. No doubt Nama will kick him out of his halls again shortly. What of the others? My mother and uncles? Asked Kelekorm. The light of the Silmaril scorched every evil creature in its vicinity, and sent thousands more fleeing the depths of Angamando. Leaderless creatures are now fleeing in panic across the plains of Anfauglith. Luckily, it seems as if Yaraquinga is well positioned to intercept and make short work of them with the armies of the east. The way should be clear for them to escape. Madras nodded. What news of Doriath? He asked. Doriath stands and suffered minimal casualties. Makalauda seems to have become quite a powerful singer. The only real point of concern remains Gothmog and his forces in Gondolin, but I shall handle him myself. Dare I ask of Arcano? Madras continues his questioning. Going north with Morifinwe and his son. His son? This was the second time someone mentioned Karnistir having a son. Turkan knew the news were sometimes slow to reach him in Gondolin, but for Noldor Prince to have been born, and for no one to have ever told him about it, what is next? Does Morgoth himself have a wife now? I guess we're all going north then, Fingon concluded. Turkan still felt the need to sit for a few moments longer. He reached for Maeglin's hand to pull him down to sit next to him so that they would continue their conversation, when Fingon looked straight at him. A ghost! My friends, the ghost of Turkana visits us now. I was told he haunts only the valley of Tumladen. Turkan rolled his eyes as Asa nodded to the group and took the disguise again. I can tell you that I am not the ghost you should be concerned about. Far from it, he grumbled, reluctantly standing when Fingon approached. Turkan grasped his forearm in a warrior's greeting. Brother, have you met our nephew, Lomion? He motioned to Maiklin, who stood next to him. He was spouting some witless nonsense about feeling like an outsider, Gillepinimpo chirped in. Maiklin wilted when both Fingon and Maidros turned their kingly gazes towards the younger elf. Lomion, the High King began, if we can put up with the likes of these goons, he gestured at everyone else, then of course you will always have your place with us. You might be the best of us, in truth. As if to bring the point home, Gillepinimpo suddenly shouted, Drop hog! And soon Turkan found himself in the midst of a sweaty pile. Praise to the Lord, everyone must have realized how awful it smelled because the hug soon ended. So, north? Kurfin asked. North, Fingon agreed. We need to find the rest of this family and bring them home. But let's take some time to acquire horses for everyone and ensure that we have the proper supplies. Angamando is not a kind place for the ill-prepared. Says the elf who assaulted it with a nod but a harp and a few arrows, Kurfin teased. The harp was a testament to unpreparedness, Fingon answered. Turkan nudged Maiklin gently with his elbow and motioned with his head to follow him up the hill a ways. When they were out of earshot, Turkan sighed. Lomion, I do not know what caused your doubts, but I want you today to know this. I love you as my own son. I have always loved you, even if I'm not the best at showing it all the time. I made you counselor, not only because of your intelligence, but because I trust you with my life. I hope one day you can trust me with yours. And as for these goons, he gestured at the rest of the family. They are pretty poor at showing their love too. But the truth is that when the enemy comes calling, they will all stand together and die together if they must. In fact, it is I who has failed on that front, but only because I love my people and desire to keep them safe. Turkan put his hands on Maiklin's shoulders. From this point onward, if you ever feel ostracized or judged, come to me and I will set things straight. Do you understand? Findagana accuses me of being an isolationist, but I would have fought Moringot alone if it was to keep you safe. Maiklin nodded slowly then. Thank you, uncle, he replied. Turkan ruffled his hair a little bit. Just be wary of Tuelpe. He's a good man, but he's still a Feanorian. Perhaps you can teach him to speak correctly. Turkan was rewarded with a smile. He's kind. So is Aracano, your younger brother. Yes, the younger brother that always needs saving. Let's go help get the supplies ready. Totta kai mä hörppään just ennen kuin mä tajuan, että mun pitää tehdä maitros. While they waited for horses and fresh supplies, Maitros turned to Kurofin. Did you hear Osse? That father sacrificed himself and broke a Silmaril? I heard. But it hasn't fully registered in my mind yet. He will return to us, you know. I know. Thanks to Luthien. But it's not that, Kurvo. It's that he did it at all. Father who led us here to Beleriand, who spoke the damnable oath. He would never have had the thought. Kurvo shrugged his shoulders. I think sometimes people surprise us. Our father, despite being a prince, led a troubled life. It was easy for him to focus on all that was taken from him instead of being thankful for what he still had. I know... Kurvo's voice faltered, and Maitros saw that he was looking at Celebrimbor as he helped to carry saddles over. I know that sometimes I forget too. Maitros patted his brother's shoulder. I know, but I guess if there is one takeaway from this revelation, it is that in the very end, our family stands together. We now know this to be true, even of our father. Stands together? The audacity! Write that down, Tinwe! But, sir, you really should be back at the healer's tent. Maitros and Kurofin turned to see a limping Finrod, one hand on a crutch, making straight for the two of them. Stand together as they just about left me behind! I can't believe the two of you! And you, Turka! he shouted over his shoulder. And that goes for your dogs too! Corfin let a chuckle out. What? Finrod snapped. Nothing, cousin. Just that your old man is really starting to come out. Unbelievable. The king of Nargothrond huffed. You're all going straight to the dungeons next time I see you. Like you could send us there, Corfin teased. And you, your majesty, are going back to the infirmary, Dinwa said. I'm as good as new and you know it, Finrod snapped at his advisor. Turning back to Maedhros, he nodded his head. So, north? What kind of children would we be if we let our parents raid evil fortresses alone? Angrod said as he too approached with Orodreth at his side. Terrible ones, Finrod agreed. Everyone be quick with those supplies. We have our parents to save. Fëanor Sve had barely reformed, and he had just set foot in Mandos, again, when the Lord of the Dead glared at him. Out! Fëanor smiled and saluted. Oh, trust me, I was just leaving. Good. But, no. No, I was just thinking. Continents sink when you start thinking, Kurofinwe. It is not a good idea. Yes, but do you really want me to walk all the way back to my brothers and wife? Sounds like an opportunity for a lot to go wrong on the way. Mandos paused mid-retort. Fine, but be warned. I am still not very good at directing where you end up. And that was how Fëanor found himself being launched across the world to land right in his son's library. Amras was reading a book when he looked up to see his father standing there. Son? Have you been here this whole time? Father? What are you doing? Eating grapes? Daydreaming? Don't you know there's a war to be won? Plus, your mother needs help. What? What is happening? Up? Up! Be gone with you! Get your fastest horses! And some good men wouldn't be a bad idea. We ride as soon as possible. Nerdanel. Fëanor tried Osanwe as soon as his very confused son was finally moving. You! Listen, my love. You can't keep doing this to me! What were you thinking? There was no other way. You think I wanted to watch my brothers kill themselves? Besides, I was already dying. It was inevitable anyway. I'm staring at a pile of ashes right now! Okay. Love, just take a few breaths. Delvo and I are coming shortly. It is a bit of a distance, so it might take some time. Just make sure my brothers don't do anything rash. You're the last one to talk, Kurofinwe! Fëanor winced as he lost his mental connection with his wife. Maybe, just maybe, he deserved that. That little pile of ash somehow still lives! Nerdanel fumed from where she still stood in the cavern. What? Finarfin asked, and in the light of the two remaining Silmarils, Nerdanel could see the tear streaks on his noble face. Yes, he just contacted me via Osanwe. He's with Delvo. Delvo? Fingolfin asked from where he sat next to his daughter. Then, still alive is a poor wording. He died, and Mandos kicked him out again. There is no other way for him to be in Estelad with Delfinwe. Erwan picked up the iron crown that still held the two Silmarils. He sacrificed himself for us, she said. Everyone grew quiet. At last, Aradhel stood and went to take the crown. I had my doubts, but it seems as if Fëanor still had a heart. He would not want us to just sit here. We must keep moving. Lomion is still missing in any case. Lomion? Fingolfin asked. I have yet to meet my own grandson. Don't tell me that he is here. He got carried away by a servant of Moringottos. We were looking for him. Rock stood and walked over to Grond. Then we should get out of these caverns. I wish to free the thralls as we search for the counselor. But what do you all think about an upgrade? He asked, bending down to inspect the hammer of the underworld. Since I had to leave my own warhammer behind. Rog, leave it. The short-haired Noldo, who looked vaguely familiar to Nerdanel, replied in a stern voice. Who was he again? I'm sorry, have we met? It has been so long, she asked. Forgive me, my lady. I am Ecthelion. Ecthelion! Yes, I remember you. You used to play with Makalaura in the summer concerts. Don't feel bad, Lady Nerdanel. I'm sure we all look a sight. I myself barely recognize Lara with that hair. This is the pot calling the kettle black, Glorfindel grumbled. I guess it's time to climb up that well. Again. Onward! Garnistir heard Argon shout from the back of a stolen horse. His cousin's hair had fallen loose, and he was like a wild banshee screaming across the plains. Gil-galad was laughing behind him, and Garnistid was starting to really miss his keep by the lake and his books. But as much as he wanted to be curled up in the sun right now, there was not a snowball's chance in Angband he was leaving his son alone with Aragorn. An hour ago, there had been a strange glow around the fortress, and then, as if its gates were flung straight open, all manner of dark creatures came pouring out. Curiously, there were very few armored orcs. Those orcs that they did run across did not appear to be soldiers and were quickly taken care of. Mostly they came across small dragon whelps, crows, and all manners of rats, snakes, and spiders. Garnistir was definitely thankful that the three of them had grabbed horses so that he did not have to walk through the rodents himself, although most did not present any trouble. And someone must have trained Gil-galad how to fight, because he and his glaive were one. Garnistir watched him with no small amount of pride as he cut down anything that dared to charge them. "Not so fast!" Aragorn cried as a pony-sized spider hissed at the group from a short distance away. And although his cousin galloped his horse with the sword brandished, Gil-galad was there first, and with the tap of his glaive, the black creature was no more. "Yes, you are not so fast," he thought he heard his son say, sounding so much like his mother. "You got the faster horse." "No, uncle, I just focused instead of postering." "Postering?" But Gil-galad only smiled as a swarm of crows approached from behind, and he effortlessly whacked them all out of the sky. "You both will be late if you continue bickering," Garnistir sighed as he trotted by them, putting on the lordly facade that he wore so well, only a small chuckle escaping as the rustling he heard behind him. They were close now. He looked up to see the very gates of Angband towering before him, and they were indeed thrown wide open. Could this be a trap? But Aragorn didn't seem to care. He was galloping straight for them. His son at least reined up beside him. "I think I'm starting to understand this. My family. No one is afraid of being themselves, and no one tries to be anyone else. It's refreshing. The Haladin, everyone was always trying to act more important and pretend they were better than they were." "Then you clearly haven't been with us long enough. Everyone thinks they're better than they are." "Well, what I mean is that there is a certain confidence." Gil-galad motioned at the charging Aragorn, as if to use him for an example. Garnistir raised an eyebrow. "Yes, that's one word for it, I suppose." His son rolled his eyes. "Never mind. Let's not let Uncle Aragano get too far ahead." The black stone walls of Angband were largely empty. Garnistir could hardly believe that the three of them simply walked into Morgoth's main stronghold. Past the main gates was a towering entranceway that danced the line between a tunnel and a grand hallway. Pillar-like designs were seen sunken into the walls when dim torchlight flickered just right. Everywhere the smell was putrid. While Garnistir highly doubted that Aragorn knew where he was going, he let him lead them. "The hallway ought to lead straight through the throne room," Aragorn declared. "It probably leads straight to a trap. The whole point of a fortress is to keep the invaders out. The big hallway just off the entrance will lead to a bottomless pit." "Unless you're basing your argument on the assumption that 1. Orcs are intelligent, and 2. Morgoth would be meek enough to put his throne room down some small staircase. Nah, he would want it front and center. Onward!" "You get to go first," Garnistir sighed. The three of them walked on in semi-darkness. Every shift of the shadows made Garnistir want to jump. He knew the armies had been sent out, but still, there should be some force left behind. Where was Morgoth himself? Then something tapped him on the shoulder. He whirled, drawing his sword, but whoever was there leapt back as fast as the wind. "Who goes there?" he shouted. "Show yourself!" "Relax, Morio." A feminine voice answered in Quenya, but it was oddly accented and gruff, almost as if the speaker hadn't used the language in some time. Gil-galad grabbed a torch off the wall and held it aloft to cast light on the speaker. Garnistir did a double take. Standing before him was a female elf dressed in leathers. Her hair was roughly braided out of her face, and a section of it held a feathered ornament. The elf's face bore several scars, and yet her blue eyes still shone like fire. She was lean but well-muscled, and 2 long daggers hung off her belt. "Lolwen?" "Once," she answered. "Now the orcs call me Quivioneth, the Life-Giver." or simply Quivia, which is far easier for them to say. I rescue slaves from the mines and those orcs ready to descend and lead them to the south. While my brother sits sipping wine, I've been leading souls out of this hell for centuries. The Black Foe has yet to catch me, and now he never will. You're a rogue! I knew you were the fun aunt, Argon said. Lalawan gave him a lopsided smile that reminded Garnistir of Finarfin. I have just returned from the far south, ready to lead the next band of unfortunate souls on their bid for freedom. But then there was an explosion of holy light. All the creatures that could do so fled. You must have encountered them on your way here. We did, Garnistir said, wincing on remembering the rats and spiders. My guess was that it was a Silmaril, and if it didn't spontaneously erupt, then my brother almost certainly had something to do with it. But come now, we may never get a chance like this again. Help me in freeing as many thralls as possible. And not just the thralls, but any orc who wishes to follow us can as well. They are slaves themselves. Do you know the way? Argon asked. Dear one, I know this fortress better than Moringatta himself. Then, Lalawan motioned for them to follow her. She led them to a small side door, down a slanting hallway, then down a rickety spiral staircase. They crossed another hallway, and in the torchlight, Garnistir could see blood marks on the walls. Lalawan finally stopped before a wooden door. This leads to where they keep the slaves they use in the pits. The pits? Training arenas for orcs. They make them practice against actual elves. These gladiators tend to be the strongest of the lot, or at least they start off that way. Here are the keys taken off the belt of orc slave masters. If you drop one, it's on your head. Free as many as you can, then we will go to the mines and forges. Garnistir carefully took the crudely crafted key. Lalawan waited for a moment to make sure they all understood, then opened the door. She waited in the shadows for a moment, hands hovering over her daggers. Then she snuck into the room. In the middle was a cage-like arena, the dirt colored red. On the walls were iron shackles, yet each and every one of them was empty. Wait, Lalawan whispered from where they stood in the middle. Garnistir tensed. Something is here, his aunt declared. Then something sprang at them from the darkness and leapt straight for Lalawan. She unsheathed her daggers and moved like a whirling storm as she wielded one in each hand. Her attacker was shadowed, but Kurofin could see a crude sword in the figure's hand. He looked awfully thin to be an orc. There was a hiss as Lalawan clipped her dagger across the attacker's arm. Then she herself yelled as he rained a fury of heavy blows down on her. Lalawan! Gilgalad yelled as Argon and Garnistir both leapt forward. Argon got there first, and his blade intercepted that of the enemy. For a moment, there was stillness. Then, Lalawan? Arcana? Immediately, attacker dropped the crude weapon. Atar? Arcana asked. The figure stepped forward into the dim light, and Garnistir saw that it was Fingolfin. His hair hung in short strands, and his tunic was ripped to shreds. But there was no denying that it was the former king. How? Fingolfin asked, his voice filled with disbelief. You really think I would want to be left behind? Argon said. Well, the son that I remembered was always oversleeping and dragging his feet. Not all the time, Argon protested, but he couldn't say anything else because then his father was hugging him. Fingolfin clutched Argon's tunic like a lifeline and simply held his baby as close to him as he could, fearing that if he let go he would be taken from him again. At last, he felt Argon try to squirm away. All right, I missed you too, Atar. I apologize for being so stupid. Fingolfin let him go. And clearly you never learned. What? Of course I have. And so we meet in Angamanda? Well, Lalawan brought me down here. Yes, speaking of Lalawan... Fingolfin turned towards his sister. She held up her hands in defense. I ask for no reward except maybe a good bottle of wine. I haven't had one of those in centuries. Mondos is really letting everyone out. I never even heard the news of your death. Well, maybe because the best of us never died. Fingolfin shook his head and offered her his arm. She took it and pulled him into a hug, patting her shoulder on the back. You call disappearing off the planet being the best of us? He asked. I was freeing slaves long before you were. Thanks for finally lifting a finger, she replied, releasing him. I presume that's why you're hanging around here? Yes, I had just finished getting those in this room out when I heard the door open. I grabbed that sword from the rack, but I never expected to see you. You know, you fought well, sister. Well, one curtsied. There's a reason why I'm still alive. But that reason is not being halfway capable in a knife fight. Do you wish to know my secret, brother? Do I? It's that I didn't use the front door. Lalwan winked. I thought we got all the slaves from this area free. The others had taken them towards the mines. Rock thinks he knows a way out from there. Ecthelion and Glorfindel will meet him there with the slaves from the forges, Aradhel said as she walked into the room. She did a double take when she saw the group. Well, if it isn't my bouncing baby brother! Hello, sister. Aragon grinned. Fancy meeting you here. Pleasure's all mine. Happy to see you got out of those hot springs. I thought you might have cooked by now. I was merely gathering my energies to deal with you. Ouch! Fingolfin pinched the bridge of his nose. It would seem as if some things never change. End of chapter 40. Stay tuned.